If it bleeds, we can kill it. Predator wasn't just a sci-fi action flick with Arnold Schwarzenegger hunting an alien. It was a production nightmare that nearly destroyed careers, bodies, and studio relationships in the unforgiving Mexican jungle. Behind those iconic scenes of muscle-bound commandos, meeting their doom lurked real danger. Cast members collapsing from heat exhaustion, a failed alien costume that wasted millions, blood-soaked jungle shoots where the camera operators vomited between takes, a future action star fired after just 2 days on set. Today, we're dropping 20 weird facts about Predator that will forever change how you see this 1987 classic. And stick around for our bonus fact, the shocking truth about the film's ending that even die-hard fans don't know. So, lock and load, because we're about to get to the chopper of Predator's wildest secrets. Fact Hashone, the terrifying alien hunter that stalked Arnold Schwarzenegger through the jungle. That role was originally played by Jean-Claude Van Damme, not as the creature we know today, but as a nimble, ninja-like alien. The original Predator design wasn't the mandible-faced hunter we love. It was a bizarre, red, insect-like creature with a long neck and a dog-like head. Van Damme, standing just 5'9", was chosen specifically because they wanted the Predator to be agile and stealthy, the opposite of the hulking commandos. But disaster struck immediately. When Van Damme arrived in Mexico, he discovered he'd be wearing a ridiculous red suit that made him look like a giant chicken. He couldn't see through the mask, suffered heat exhaustion in the 100-plus degree jungle, and hated that no one would see his martial arts skills or face. After just 2 days of filming, Van Damme was gone, either quit or fired, depending on who tells the story. The Predator we know today emerged from the ashes of this spectacular failure. Fact #2. The original Predator costume wasn't just bad, it was catastrophic. After Van Damme's departure, the production soldiered on with the original design, spending over $1.5 million on a creature that producer Joel Silver later called a catastrophe in rubber. Director John McTiernan didn't mince words. It looked like a guy in a lizard suit with the head of a duck. When initial footage came back from the jungle, studio executives were horrified. The costume looked ridiculous, couldn't perform basic movements, and worst of all, wasn't scary. Production shut down completely, not for days, but for months. The entire film hung in the balance as special effects legend Stan Winston was frantically called in to save the production. Working from a concept sketch on an airplane by James Cameron, who suggested mandibles, Winston and his team created the iconic Predator design in just 2 weeks. When 7'2" actor Kevin Peter Hall replaced Van Damme, the creature transformed from laughable to legendary. But the production had already burned through millions on a design that would never see the screen. Fact #3. The Mexican jungle location wasn't just uncomfortable, it was deadly. Filmed in Palenque, Mexico, the cast and crew faced conditions that transformed the set into a real-life survival scenario. Scorpions and snakes infested the sleeping quarters. Dysentery swept through the crew like wildfire. The terrain was so treacherous that crew members regularly fell, equipment was damaged daily, and medical evacuations became routine. The 105-degree heat combined with 95% humidity created conditions where simply standing still could lead to heat exhaustion. Actor Bill Duke recalled, "We were shooting in a real jungle. What you see is what we experienced. The sweat isn't makeup, it's actual sweat. The exhaustion isn't acting. It's real fatigue from carrying 40-pound packs up and down mountains." Arnold Schwarzenegger himself collapsed multiple times, once requiring IV fluids between takes. The production's medical tent often had more occupants than the set itself. This wasn't just making a movie, It was surviving one, FACT-4. The famous scene where the team unleashes thousands of rounds into the jungle wasn't just impressive firearms work. It was record-breaking. The sequence used more blank ammunition than any film before it, over 10,000 rounds fired in a single day of shooting. But those weapons weren't props. They were fully functional firearms, firing blank cartridges, generating real recoil, real heat, and real danger. Jesse Ventura's massive M134 minigun, nicknamed Old Painless, weighed over 125 pounds and required a hidden power cable running down his leg to a battery pack. When firing, the barrel reached temperatures that could cause third-degree burns instantly. The weapon's recoil was so intense that Ventura could only fire it in 3-second bursts before being pushed backward, despite his immense strength. The sound was so deafening that even with ear protection, several crew members suffered permanent hearing damage. The shell casings ejected at such velocity they caused minor burns on Ventura's arms. It wasn't movie magic. It was military-grade firepower turned loose in a jungle studio. FACT-5. That iconic bicep-bulging handshake between Arnold and Carl Weathers wasn't originally in the script. It was competitive one-upmanship between two of Hollywood's most physically imposing actors. During rehearsals, Schwarzenegger and Weathers, both notorious for their competitive nature, began trying to outgrip each other. Director John McTiernan spotted the testosterone-fueled exchange and immediately ordered cameras to roll. What viewers don't see is that both men were squeezing so hard they nearly cut off circulation to each other's hands. Weathers later admitted, "We were both trying to crush each other's hand, not as Dutch and Dylan, but as Arnold and Carl. The veins you see popping aren't special effects." The take left both actors with bruised palms, but created one of action, cinema's most replicated moments, a meme before memes existed. The improvised greeting captured the film's masculine bravado perfectly, cementing itself in movie history not through careful planning, but through pure, unscripted machismo. FACT-6. The film famously assembled the most physically imposing cast in action movie history, but behind that muscle-bound exterior lurked a secret, a brutal training regimen that pushed them to the edge of collapse. It wasn't just occasional workouts. It was military-style training that began at 3 a.m. every morning. While Arnold slept in his air-conditioned trailer, the rest of the cast, determined to match his legendary physique, created the Jungle Club. Carl Weathers led the pre-dawn weightlifting sessions, followed by 2-mile runs in the jungle heat before cameras even rolled. Jesse Ventura pushed his body so hard that medical staff warned him about potential heart damage from combining intense workouts with stimulants and the extreme heat. Sonny Landham dropped 25 pounds of pure muscle during filming, despite consuming 7,000 calories daily. Bill Duke suffered a shoulder injury so severe he needed surgery after filming Wrapped. The physical toll wasn't for screen time or close-ups. It was for fleeting moments when their bodies would be visible, driven by a collective determination not to be overshadowed by Schwarzenegger's legendary physique. FACT-7. Shane Black, now known as the director of Iron Man 3 and The Nice Guys, wasn't hired for his acting skills as radio operator Hawkins. He was hired because Fox wanted him to secretly rewrite the troubled script. Black had just written Lethal Weapon, making him Hollywood's hottest screenwriter. But when he arrived in Mexico, he discovered the truth. Producer Joel Silver had brought him on with a hidden agenda: fix the script while pretending to be just another actor. It wasn't a request. It was a calculated move to get emergency script work without paying WGA traits or alerting the other writers. Black refused outright, focusing solely on his small role instead. His punishment was swift and brutal. His character became the first to die, His screen time was drastically reduced, and his death scene was filmed in one quick take at the end of an exhausting day. The studio's sneaky plan backfired completely. Not only did Black refuse to write, but the uncomfortable situation created tension that permeated the set. Ironically, decades later, Fox would hire Black to direct and write The Predator, 2018. Fact hash height. Actor Sonny Landham, who played the knife-wielding tracker Billy, wasn't just intimidating on screen. He was so volatile and dangerous in real life that the studio required an unusual condition in his contract: a personal bodyguard, not to protect Landham from others. To protect others from Landham, the 6'4" actor had a background in adult films before transitioning to mainstream roles like 48 Hours, but his reputation for bar fights, violent outbursts, and threatening behavior made insurance companies reluctant to cover him. The solution? A bodyguard who shadowed him 24/7, preventing Landham from drinking excessively or engaging in physical altercations. The Guardian would literally sleep outside Landham's door each night. Director John McTiernan recalled, "The bodyguard's sole job was to ensure Sonny didn't hurt anyone, including himself. He wasn't protecting Sonny, he was protecting us from Sonny." Despite these precautions, Landham still managed to threaten several Mexican crew members and once pulled his hunting knife on a local driver. The violence simmering beneath Billy's stoic exterior wasn't just good acting, it was barely contained reality. Fact hash 9. The film's most disturbing scene, where the team discovers skinned bodies hanging from the trees, wasn't originally so graphic. The initial version was considerably tamer, showing shadowy figures and implied horror rather than explicit gore. But test audiences weren't scared enough. Studio executives demanded more impact, more shock, more visceral horror. What followed was an unprecedented move for an action film of that era. A second unit was dispatched months after principal photography wrapped. Their sole mission: create grotesquely realistic skinned corpses to be edited into the existing footage. Special effects artist Stan Winston's team crafted full-body prosthetics so realistic that several crew members became physically ill during filming. The synthetic bodies contained artificial blood reservoirs that would release fluid when disturbed by the wind, creating the disturbing dripping effect. When the new footage was shown to test audiences, the reaction was immediate. Multiple viewers left the theater, and one person fainted. The studio had their answer. The scene was horrifying enough to stay. That single reshoot transformed Predator from pure action to horror-action hybrid, helping cement its place in both genres. Fact Hashani 0. The iconic Predator clicking sound, that spine-tingling noise that signaled doom, wasn't made by sophisticated audio equipment. It was created by Optimus Prime. Voice actor Peter Cullen, famous for voicing the Transformers leader, created the sound by mimicking a horseshoe crab he had encountered on a beach. The creature had flipped onto its back, and the clicking noise it made as it struggled stuck with Cullen for years. When sound designers were struggling to find the right vocalization for the alien hunter, Cullen demonstrated the noise, a reverberating clicking made by manipulating his tongue against his mouth's roof while recording at half speed. Go ahead and like and subscribe, because we're just halfway through these mind-blowing Predator facts. And trust me, the next 10 are even more shocking than what you've heard so far. Plus, our bonus fact will completely change how you see the film's final showdown. FACT hash on 1. That scene where Carl Weathers' arm gets blown off? It wasn't movie magic. It was a practical effect that went horrifically right. The production built a hyper-realistic prosthetic arm cast from Weathers' actual limb, complete with functioning veins and synthetic blood reservoirs. What nobody told Weathers was how explosively realistic the effect would be. When the Predator fired, Genuine explosive charges detonated inside the fake arm, sending a geyser of fake blood everywhere, including directly into Weathers' face and mouth. His shock and disgust, completely authentic. Weathers later admitted he was so startled by the explosive force and volume of blood that his reaction wasn't acting at all. The take was so visceral that it caused a crew member to vomit on set. The prosthetic arm was so convincing that when production wrapped, Mexican customs officials detained the prop department, believing they were attempting to smuggle actual human remains out of the country. The special effects team had to demonstrate how the arm worked to prove it wasn't real human tissue. Fact, Hashan 2. The famous scene where Arnold covers himself in mud to hide from the Predator's thermal vision wasn't just uncomfortable, it was medically dangerous. The mud wasn't typical movie makeup. It was a mixture of clay, mineral oil, and actual river silt that cinematographer Donald McAlpine determined would photograph perfectly in the jungle light. But the concoction was never tested for skin contact safety. Schwarzenegger had to be coated in this mixture for 3 consecutive 18-hour shooting days. The combination of heat, humidity, and the sealed nature of the mud mixture prevented his skin from breathing properly, leading to fever-like symptoms and elevated body temperature. By the 3rd day, Arnold developed a severe rash and swelling across 80% of his body. Medical staff warned that continuing could lead to kidney issues as his body absorbed chemicals through his skin. McTiernan refused to suspend filming, countering with a solution, a full-body medical-grade silicone lubricant applied before the mud to create a barrier. Arnold endured, but later called it the most physically uncomfortable sequence of his entire career, a remarkable statement from an actor known for performing in extreme conditions. Fact, Hashan 3. The invisible Predator effect, now a standard CGI trick, required revolutionary techniques in 1987. The shimmering, cloaked appearance wasn't digital at all. It was achieved through a painful and painstaking process. Actor Kevin Peter Hall had to wear a bright red suit made of a special fabric against a red screen, not green, which was standard. This specific shade of red would create a cleaner outline for the optical printing process that followed. Each frame of film containing the cloaking effect required up to 24 hours of manual compositing work. A team of 12 visual effects artists worked around the clock for 6 months to complete just 4 minutes of screen time. What most viewers don't realize is that the heat ripple effect, the subtle distortion that makes the cloaked predator visible, wasn't planned. It was an optical printing mistake that occurred during the compositing process. When McTiernan saw the error, instead of demanding a fix, he recognized it as the perfect visual metaphor. The creature isn't perfectly invisible, just like the jungle heat creates visible distortion waves. The mistake became one of cinema's most recognizable special effects. Fact, Hashan 4. The Predator's terrifying face wasn't just designed to scare audiences, it was specifically crafted to unnerve Arnold Schwarzenegger on set. Stan Winston's team incorporated elements of predatory animals from across the animal kingdom, but with a specific focus. Winston had studied Schwarzenegger's previous films and noticed the actor rarely displayed genuine fear on camera. The challenge: create a creature so unsettling it would elicit authentic reactions of dread. The mandibles were modeled, after insect parts magnified to human scale. The eye sockets were intentionally reminiscent of human skulls after decomposition. The skin texture incorporated elements of reptile, arthropod, and decomposing organic matter. When Schwarzenegger first saw the completed Predator costume on set, his reaction was precisely what Winston had hoped for. Arnold visibly recoiled, later admitting, "It wasn't acting when I looked disturbed in those final scenes. That thing genuinely unsettled something primal in my brain." Winston's psychological design approach worked so well that several crew members refused to eat lunch near Kevin Peter Hall when he was in the Predator costume. The design's effectiveness wasn't just artistic brilliance, it was calculated psychological warfare against the film's star. Fact, #5. The film's infamous sexual Tyrannosaurus line wasn't just crude male banter, it was Jesse Ventura's deliberate attempt to sabotage the film's television broadcast potential. In the 1,980 seconds, films were heavily edited for network television, with profanity and sexual content removed. Ventura, a provocateur by nature, deliberately inserted the graphic sexual reference, knowing the line would be impossible to edit without changing the scene's meaning entirely. It wasn't just improvisation. It was calculated media manipulation by a future politician. Ventura later revealed, "I knew exactly what I was doing. Either they'd have to cut the scene entirely or broadcast something inappropriate. Either way, I won." When the film was eventually broadcast on network television, censors were faced with an impossible choice. The solution? They dubbed over Ventura's voice with a different actor saying "Major Hunter," a change so jarring and out of character that it became notorious among fans. The line became one of the film's most quoted moments, featured on merchandise and referenced in subsequent Predator films, all because Ventura wanted to create a no-win scenario for television censors, FACT, #6. The film's original ending wasn't just different, it was scrapped after being fully filmed at enormous expense. In the original finale, after defeating the Predator, Dutch, Schwarzenegger, discovers something horrifying: a second larger Predator ship landing nearby. The climactic sequence showed Dutch, exhausted and wounded, facing not just one alien hunter, but an entire hunting party. The implication was clear: his victory was meaningless. He was still prey. The sequence cost over $1.2 million to film, requiring extensive model work and practical effects. But test audiences rejected it completely, finding it too bleak and unsatisfying after watching Dutch triumph against a seemingly unbeatable foe. With release deadlines looming, McTiernan hastily shot the helicopter rescue ending we know today. The original footage was believed lost until 2010, when partial segments were discovered in a storage facility during pre-production for Predators. The studio made the right call. The existing ending became iconic. But that alternate universe where Predator ended with a hopeless Arnold facing certain death still exists in fragments of film locked away in Fox's archives. Fact, #7. The film's production didn't just include two future U.S. governors, Schwarzenegger, California, and Ventura, Minnesota. It actually influenced their political campaigns decades later. When Ventura ran for governor in 1998, his campaign strategically employed Predator references to subtly remind voters of his connection to Schwarzenegger, who was already politically active and popular. Campaign materials featured phrases like, "I ain't got time to bleed," his character's famous line. More surprisingly, Schwarzenegger's successful 2003 gubernatorial campaign actually hired Predator's original marketing team to develop campaign imagery. The connection wasn't coincidental, it was strategic. Political analysts noted that both men benefited from the film's themes of leadership under pressure and triumph over overwhelming odds. Campaign focus groups revealed voters subconsciously associated both candidates with their Predator characters, creating an unusual form of political capital. When Ventura won his election, one of his first calls was to Schwarzenegger. The message? Your move. 5 years later, when Arnold was elected, his response to Ventura was direct. I told you I'd be back. Hollywood created their friendship, but Predator transformed it into a political brotherhood that would shape two state governments. FACT, #8. The jungle setting wasn't just a narrative choice. It was selected because Guatemala, the original filming location, suddenly became too dangerous. Just weeks before production was set to begin, a real military coup erupted in Guatemala, precisely where the film planned to shoot. The political situation deteriorated so rapidly that the production's advance team had to be evacuated under armed escort. Fox executives desperately scrambled for an alternative, eventually selecting Palenque, Mexico, but this last-minute change created a cascade of problems. The Mexican location lacked infrastructure, requiring the construction of roads just to transport equipment. The nearest hospital was hours away. There was no suitable accommodation for cast and crew. The solution? Build an entire village from scratch. In less than 3 weeks, construction teams erected temporary housing, dining facilities, and even a makeshift gym for the physique-conscious cast. This forced relocation drained millions from the budget before a single frame was shot. When filming began, the production was already severely over budget and behind schedule, conditions that would plague the entire shoot. The irony wasn't lost on the cast. They were filming a story about special forces in hostile territory while essentially living it themselves. Fact Hashaninin. The Predator's distinctive vision, that heat-sensing red and orange view of the world, wasn't just a cool visual effect. It fundamentally changed how thermal imaging technology was portrayed in cinema. Before Predator, thermal imaging in films was typically shown as simple red blobs or crude outlines. The film's visual effects team wanted something more sophisticated that would feel alien yet scientifically plausible. To create it, they consulted with military contractors who developed actual thermal imaging systems for the U.S. military. Using classified technology as inspiration, they created a visual language for heat vision that became the industry standard. What most viewers don't realize is that the Predator's vision mode is dramatically more advanced than anything that existed in 1987. The film effectively predicted developments in thermal imaging that wouldn't become reality until decades later. Military developers have admitted being influenced by the film, with one DARPA contractor noting, "We showed Predator in our lab as a conceptual goal for what soldiers should eventually see through their visors. It wasn't just movie magic. It was accidental technological prophecy that shaped how actual military systems would develop, creating a rare instance of science fiction directly influencing military reality." Fact #20. The production didn't just overcome challenges, it suffered the most expensive mistake in 1,980 seconds action cinema history. After 3 weeks of filming with the original Predator design, the decision to scrap everything and restart with Stan Winston's new creature wasn't just a creative choice, it was financial catastrophe. Over $3 million of footage, approximately 25% of the film's original budget, was deemed unusable and destroyed. Insurance wouldn't cover the loss since the studio had approved the original design. Fox executives demanded someone be fired as accountability for the disaster. The person sacrificed? The original creature designer, who was publicly blamed despite warnings he had given about the costume's functionality in jungle conditions. The shutdown lasted so long that Carl Weathers had to leave to fulfill other contractual obligations, returning weeks later with a noticeably different physique that required creative camera angles to hide. When filming resumed, the production operated under extraordinary pressure. The studio assigned a financial supervisor who had to approve every single shot before it was filmed, sometimes delaying production for hours during the most expensive location shoot in Fox's history. Against these impossible odds, McTiernan somehow delivered a film that came within 10% of its revised budget, a miracle that saved careers and established him as a director who could handle crisis. Bonus fact: the Predator's self-destruction sequence at the film's climax wasn't just a convenient plot device. It was directly inspired by a real-world military incident that remains classified to this day. During production, the film's military consultant, a former Special Forces operator, shared a heavily redacted account of a 1,970 seconds encounter between U.S. forces and Soviet special operators in Southeast Asia. According to this consultant, Soviet forces had implemented scorched earth fail-safes, explosive devices that would eliminate all evidence if operatives were compromised. The film's writers were so struck by this concept, they incorporated it into the Predator's character, a hunter so dedicated to the code of the hunt that it would rather obliterate itself than be captured. What audiences don't know is that the laughter heard during the Predator's self-destruction sequence wasn't added in post-production. It was the actual sound of the creature's voice slowed down and distorted, intended to convey that the Predator wasn't just accepting defeat, but mocking Dutch for a victory that would ultimately prove meaningless in the larger cosmic hunt. This explanation connects directly to the film's sequel, where it's revealed that Predator hunts are essentially sport, and Dutch didn't win anything except temporary survival in a game that never ends. Predator wasn't just another 1,980 seconds action film. It was a milestone that merged genres, nearly bankrupted a studio, and forged actors through genuine hardship into Hollywood legends. What began as a troubled production fighting against impossible odds somehow transformed, much like its alien antagonist, into something far more powerful and enduring than anyone involved could have imagined. The next time you watch Dutch and his team trek through that Central American jungle, remember, the sweat is real, the exhaustion isn't acting, and beneath every frame of film lies a production story as intense as the hunt itself. If you enjoyed these Predator facts, go ahead and subscribe for more deep dives into Hollywood's most fascinating productions. Because in filmmaking, just like in the jungle, if it bleeds, we can find the story.